Might be able to know just from this.
Hello, hello, hello.
Good. It's working. So I'm just going to mute this and take the video a few minutes. And
6 o'clock. Ready to go?
You're good.
All right. So this is a workshop, not a voting kind of meeting per se. So the select board won't be making any decisions per se on any kind of budget issues or anything like that. I'd like to ask that we focus on high-level issues as much as we can, focus on strategic aspects of the relationship between the different organizations and how we can make it work as best we possibly can going forward. Just a couple of opening thoughts. The goals that we came up with, mostly Vika and me and a couple of board members weighed in, increase clarity on issues of finance and responsibility regarding the land and the operations at CRCC, KP, and CIS, and Town of Shabik being involved. CIS is part of the town, Kids Place is not part of the town, CRC is not part of the town, Kids Place is part of CRC, so it's complicated, but how do we best manage all the responsibilities and obligations and opportunities to support the community in the best way possible? If we could get to consensus on the nature of the ongoing relationship between these parties, that would be great. I had some further conversations today with a person who had a lot to do with the beginning of these MOUs. Go ahead. And he made the point, it was her, he made the point that MOUs are a process, they're a tool, but we could easily manage these relationships and these commitments to each other with a spreadsheet, with a lease, with a contract. There's all kinds of ways to do it. A memorandum of understanding just seems to be a pretty friendly way to go about doing it. But if we decide as a group that's not what we want to do, we certainly don't have to. He suggested also that it could be a handshake, and Vika made the point that's great until you change over. You need something in writing because boards change over, and it's like to keep things going forward on some sort of organized basis. And then one goal to update and sign a new MOU, and maybe it's one, maybe it's more than one, maybe it's one MOU that covers mutual obligations between all the 4 organizations. I'm not at all believing we can get there tonight. I just hope we can kind of set the framework tonight for getting to a place where we all understand where we're coming from on finances, where we're coming from on obligations and responsibilities. So with that, it'd be great if we just go around the room and just take no more than 2 minutes, because there's more people here than I thought originally. Oh, I have a goal of finishing this by 7:30. I think if we talk more than an hour and a half, we're probably just gonna be talking in circles. So every now and then I'll kind of call out time on a conversation, and if the group decides, yes, we have to keep talking about this, we'll keep talking. If the group says no, then we won't. That's okay with everybody. Okay. So just take 2 minutes. What would you like to see us accomplish tonight? Hit it.
Are we each talking from the school committee, or are we just doing like the school?
Actually, let's do it 3 minutes and one person from each organization. That'd be better.
Okay. I don't know if I really need 3 minutes, but, so I guess, our biggest goal is to gain clarity as to what we are looking for the rec center to provide or assist us in providing for, our school age kids. Being the use of the gymnasium, being, for a gym class, as well as assisting us with our after-school program. And then the other thing that, we wanted to get some clarity on from not only the rec center, but the town is the mowing issue. And, we were in quite a predicament last year. And so just clarity and some understanding and some guidance as to how to handle that.
Caitlin, are you talking for Kids Place?
I just want to make sure that all questions are answered by anyone that's here concerning the finances around Kids Place and the division within the recreation center. In terms of, I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about where Kids Place sits within the rec center, how it's operating, and the projected positive cash flow into place for that, and make sure that everyone understands that. So I won't get into the details, but make sure that everyone understands where we're at.
So, who's talking from the red?
So, I want to echo everything that you said. We're in a very similar boat. Our number one goal is to try and understand, or at least put four corners on it. What is the product that the town is buying? What is the product that the school committee is buying when they give us money? The thing that's hard for us is that we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do over the next 5 years from a financing perspective. And the town, and by proxy, still work, biggest customers, right? So if y'all ain't happy, you got problems. But what's been challenging over the past time that I've been on the board, but also as I'm trying to sit down and come up with a financial plan for what are we doing going forward for the next 5 years, because we have significant, not just operational expenses, capital expenses, is when we sit in front of you every year and say, we'd really love for you to fund this, we want to know what you want in return for that. Does that make sense? I.e., if we had an MOU, if we had a document that says what specifically the goalposts that you expect us to deliver to are, we can cost that and tell you what that costs. And you can tell us, you know, okay, you want that thing, or no, we want more, or no, we want less because it costs too much, whatever that is. But from a fundraising perspective, from a capital needs perspective, do we even have the right facilities to deliver what the town wants and what the school wants? We don't have any way to do that analysis because we just don't know where the goalposts are. So if you guys can define, this is the product we want, we can figure out a way to get there, but we want to deliver to that. We want to have a defined set of criteria that says, this is what you want, and we do it.
Thanks, man. So I will point out that it was pointed out to me late yesterday, or early this morning. The board, the select board, did not meet in advance to come up with one position. I mistakenly, or whatever, set this up as a workshop, not thinking that we needed to meet as a group. So you guys may have met and come up with a goal that you just spoke to, you just spoke to, you just spoke to. We're still 4 people and have not come up with a common position. So I'd like for each select board member, if you guys will grant us that forbearance, to just say what you're hoping to accomplish tonight in 3 minutes or less. Mark, you want to start?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I read over the questions that the rec center and the school would like to address. I think those are the most important things for tonight. As far as, if I may address Matt's, opening statement, which was a good one. I'm not sure that I, as a select person and a taxpayer, can identify specifically what I would be asking the rec center to deliver to the people today on behalf of their tax dollars as far as exact services and programs. I kind of see it a little more holistically, I guess. That's why we're funding a percentage of the service. That's how I've always looked at it, right, wrong, or in between. So, if we as a community, nonprofit to a taxpayer entity moving forward, have to get more specific, so be it. I'm not sure that that's correct or incorrect, so, I mean, I'm talking circles. I'm not sure if that's important, that we met before the workshop. I'm not sure. I'm in favor. So it's going to be prepared.
Carol or David?
Well, I think we're in kind of a strange position because historically towns had to take care of itself. Other towns, that's not true. They take care of themselves, but then they have other organizations that self-fund and we are merged together. I think the important thing tonight really, is to come to some agreement on the dollar amount without getting into the weeds too much. I think that's what Mark was saying. We don't need to come up with the actual list of what's going to happen and how much it is. We just need to decide how much each of these groups is going to receive and where it's going to come from. It's just pretty simple.
Yeah. Carol?
I guess for me, I think that I try to sit in this seat
you know, for the tax credit. So we get a significant amount of money. Involved with the rest prior to becoming that, with some school committee, what kinds of services we expected and received. And it seems to have evolved in a way. And so I think it's a good time to visit that. But for me personally, and this is not the board speaking, I think that the childcare kids place is a priority, and funding that is a priority, partly because it has pretty significant deficit. And I think it's an essential service for the so for me, I think that's, and I think I can justify that to the community because it's essential. So that's my personal.
Thanks. Yes,
Difficult to hear back here. Sorry, we got late. Can we move up? To the table?
Come back here.
please come up. Yes. It's, we weren't sure how many members of the public were going to come, but please come on. So,
Yeah. But would you mind just trying to speak on?
will do. I want to point out that we, as best I understand it, we should not be making specific decisions on specific line items. This is not a board meeting. This is a workshop. We can't vote. So we can talk about a few things, but I'd rather not get too deep in the weeds. My personal goals are that we honor the original document that started a lot of this relationship, which is the lease of the land under the rec center. The lease that was written by Cumberland as leaseor to the rec center as leasee, and as recently amended primarily just to change the name from Cumberland to the town of Shebig. That was done a few years ago. That there's a copy of that lease floating around for everybody to take a look at. But I want to pay attention to that lease, and it in several cases aligns well with some of my goals for the relationship between the rec and Kids Place and the town and the school. I would also like to mention that one of the reasons, I've been told anyway, that one of the reasons that a MOU was first proposed several years ago was that there was concern on the part of the town that a large asset of the rec center, which is the building, was aging, and there was not at that time any sort of long-term capital planning, at least not that the board knew about. And in the event of the failure of the rec, I'm sure you all know, the asset comes to the town. So the town has some sort of interest in making sure the asset is well taken care of. Not that the town has any ownership now, but someday, whether it wants to or not, the town could. And that's a scary thing, but from the standpoint of fiduciary responsibility to the citizens, something the board wanted to be paying attention to. So that was one of the original reasons for even contemplating. Personally, I think I agree with what Matt was talking about and what others have talked about in terms of a long-term look and making sure that not just annual operational profit and loss, but also capital planning on a long-term basis is done as well at each of these organizations, all four of these organizations, because they're all important. And then personally, one of my goals is that the rec do everything it can to take care of the year-round community first. And that includes Kids Place, but that includes programming, and that includes after-school programming, that includes what's going on in the summertime, what's going on in the wintertime. I think if you read the lease, that language is in there, that spirit is in the lease. And I would like to encourage us to keep that in mind as we're talking. Mika, did you have anything to add to what's been said?
No, I think most of the parts have been well covered. I think the one point that I would like to make is that it might be an assumption on my part, but I think I can probably say with the fact that majority of the people in this room probably have not read or even knew that some of these documents were in existence, which has a good explanation for why some of this miscommunication has taken place and some of the misunderstanding about what the expectations are. And so I think that, going back to what Bob was saying, that the goal of this workshop is not to finalize any of these documents, is not necessarily to finalize the final dollar number or have all the questions answered. It's a workshop to gauge the understanding and the goals of each department or each organization, but it's really kind of the starting point. With these particular documents, a lot of them were started relatively close to this time, but they were later in the spring, if not summertime, when they were officially signed for those that were signed. So these documents would be brought back to the select board for a final vote and approval on the behalf of the board. That's not a decision that could take place here. It's not a decision that the board can make here because it's a workshop. And so echoing back to what David said, well, it would be nice to have an agreement and an understanding of what the support is going to be for a monetary number from the board tonight. That's not the atmosphere for that decision. On Wednesday, they have a budget discussion. So that's where that number would be decided and approved on. So if we kind of follow the proper steps that the board needs to make, those are the steps that's set in place. And so I just want to, echo that it's an overwhelming discussion because there are several different entities involved in this and it's very intertwined. But for those that have not done so, I would really encourage reading the lease and the memorandums that had been written once upon a time, because that's really the foundation. So back to what, what was said earlier, the last signed memorandum, it very clearly states in there that, based on the money being distributed, the distribution to the CRC, it's at their discretion for spending. And so those are the questions that we have today that really need to be cleared up. And with some of those questions being answered, these documents could be redesigned and however these parties agree to, and then hopefully have better clarification of what is appropriate or isn't appropriate for the rec center or Kids Place to come and ask for funds. And so with Kids Place memorandum in particular, there is a specific dollar amount that is being asked in the memorandum. The reason that that is in place and is in front of everyone is because that dollar amount has been adjusted. So naturally that should be changed. And so that's kind of why this conversation has taken place to start out with.
And that MOU that Vika just referred to, the one between Kids Place and Select Board, as best we know, it never got signed. It was a discussion that was happening. Meetings were requested that didn't happen, turnovers on the notes, all that kind of thing. I personally would suggest that none of these MOUs include dollar figures in them, but rather that the dollar figures happen as part of the conversation in the budget process, which we're also taking steps to improve that process to make it less painful, less cramped, less onerous over time. And there'll be a workshop coming up with the ad hoc finance committee soon that we'll be talking about that. But to me, it's analogous to how we've taken fees out of ordinances. We've taken virtually all fees out of the ordinances and put them into a table so that we don't have to wait for town meeting to vote on changing a clam license from $10 to $15. That's now a select board decision. The select board has to vote on it in a certain way and all that kind of thing. But for this particular MOU, if it goes forward, I would propose that we take the dollar figure out of it. One way to amplify what I think Vika was saying about the importance of studying these documents, in the lease, if everybody has a copy of that, on page 2 of the lease, under security deposit, leasee shall pay no security deposit, but shall be fully responsible for repairs, maintenance, and construction. And which said improvements will become the property of the town at the end of the time when the bank year default here under. I'm not quite sure what all that is saying legally, but it, to me, gives credence to what Mark was saying. The board, I think, personally, should be looking at a gross dollar amount and adjusting that if adjustments are needed on an annual basis, based on where we are with the budget overall, based on where we are with the impact on taxpayers, and based on the financial presentations that we just began this year that we clearly need to make a little more streamlined than they were this year. But for example, I personally would not vote for increasing the allocation by $10,000 because a PFAS water filter costs $10,000. Rather, the maintenance of the building is the responsibility of the rec. You're now, I believe, taking a long-term view at your financial planning, both P&L, but also building up reserves, building up capital repairs and maintenance and capital improvements, capital replacement long-term. So I would agree with Mark from the standpoint that it's less detailed, and you guys are the experts in all things rec center. We're not. Our job is to do the best job we can with the taxpayer funds. But that's, for me, one example of why it's important to really look at these documents. I'd never read that lease before. I used to be president of the rec. I'd never read that lease before. I'm kind of embarrassed about it. So I'm talking too much.
Number 2.
Consensus on the nature of the ongoing relationship between these parties. Are these MOUs needed, or is there a better way to outline our responsibilities? Matt?
Just to go back to what you were saying before and segue into that point. From the rec center's perspective, the contractual structure in terms of what's best for the relationship, in our mind, is completely flexible with respect to we're not wedded to one specific contractual mechanism. And if that involves having an MOU mechanism or reopening a lease, whatever you guys want to do to get to the end goal, we're going to be very flexible on that. What's tricky about moving from the conceptual to the detail, and I don't want to talk about the detail here, it's like stuff like $10,000 for a filter, that's not why we're here. The thing that makes it hard is that when we have these documents, they're hard to renegotiate, right? That like these become static things that persist over the tenor of a decade, like year to year needs of the taxpayers change, needs of the community change, the needs of the facility change. And we have a budgeting process where we try to game out what we think we're going to need for the current fiscal year ahead of that fiscal year. And then we show up in the middle of the fiscal year and hope that we get the allocation in our budget that we did back in November for the upcoming fiscal year. If there was a way to check in with the town and say, okay, we are now starting our budgeting process for financial year 25. And now it's June of 24. Can we send you a list of proposed services or programming or the things that you think as a town that you'd like to subsidize? And have that list reviewed and say, okay, this seems reasonable. This is kind of within the sphere of the document itself. Go work up the price on this so that we can not end up in a position with a cold shower come March, April of the fiscal year that's currently in flight, but instead say, okay, hey, we know we can't commit to numbers in November, December, but we know generally what these things cost. We priced them last year, you agreed these things last year, so we've got some visibility going into our financial year that A, we're delivering on what you want, because that changes all the time. B, you like the price, because that changes all the time. And C, it's politically palatable because the politics change all the time, as opposed to just showing up this high stakes, make or break budgeting process in the middle of the year. If there's a way for us to structure it so that we've got more runway and it's more collaborative, that would be super productive for us.
Can I answer that?
Please.
So I understand where you're coming from. I think what something to keep in mind is the town, for the entire community, all the departments involved and the school start their broad budget in December of 2023, looking at June of 2025 and having the anticipated expenses all the way out. Well, and so I guess what the point that I'm trying to make is that I think it would be great for the town to be able to meet that goal for you. But for the town, it's the whole concern of all the departments and the school. And so it's a hard meet, I think, to have that, which is why these memorandums probably exist and that dollar value. And in the MOUs, it says, you come to the town, you ask for the amount, the board chooses to approve or not approve, the voters vote on it, and it's at your discretion to figure out how to best spend that money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm very clear on that process for me. What I'm trying to do is in conversation around MOU and the existing towns process, how we can be more collaborative and more communicative so that as needs evolve that are not necessarily contemplated by the MOU itself, that we have a mechanism to meet those needs. So that, because for me as treasurer, it's entirely possible from a risk management perspective, like we could end up at the town meeting, we could get reset, right? Like you guys could say, sorry, no, here's no money. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to manage around and roll on. But number two, how do I talk to my donors about it? How do I talk to my staff about it? How do I talk to our constituency about that? Which is.
Okay, Matt, I think you get your point. Yeah. Couple quick answers and I'm gonna ask the board to reply. One, if you look at the history of what the rec has been given by the town, it is not this. It is this. Graph it out. It started out at $50,000 a long time ago. It stayed at 50,000 for a long time. It's gone up a couple times. But what you're describing is a chaotic process. This has not been that. So the second thing, when you say what we want from you is erratic and changes all the time, I think that's the goal of if it's an MOU or if it's a spreadsheet, a statement of expectations. I don't think the expectations of this board or of prior boards have swayed that much. And especially when we say, let's look back at what the lease says. So please, I'm talking too much. Somebody else talk.
What are you looking to, answer the question that you?
Matt raised some points. I'd like to focus on the question that I asked, but if there's a way to respond to what Matt said other than what I said.
Well, I don't want to disregard what Matt said.
Right.
I just want to clarify what's part of the question, what I would think is the importance of MOUs.
Sure. Yep, it is.
I think they are important. I think they can serve their purpose, and I'll give an example. We have an MOU with the Big Transportation Company. It's fairly simple. Basically, the town taxpayers maintain and, supply the landing facilities at Stonewall and Pleasant Island and help keep those working in good order in exchange for the rescue service for the community. Also maintain the wharf agreement discussions with the town of Yarmouth. To me, that's a classic example of a good working MOU. I realize they all are going to be unique, but I think, and I guess we never got back to the Kids Place MOU, so I apologize for that, but I guess we just never got back to it and finished it, signed it, ratified it, if you will. But I think it shows from both directions to the taxpayer that we're trying to make it work. Do they work perfectly all the time? And actual? No. But I think it's important to have the expectations and once in a while say, hey, I looked this over and I'm really doing with the part. We need this part, so that's my opinion on that specific part of the question. Does that help?
It does. Thank you. Anybody else from the board or for David?
Okay, the purpose of the MOU, I think, is to set the stage. It's not really to get down to the nitty gritty of how much everything is going to pay or cost. And I think that it's important to not get caught in the weeds. and to take a look at the bigger picture. And when I think about the fire department, I think about what we pay to protect ourselves. When I think about the school, I think about what we pay to educate our kids. And when I think about the rec center, I think back to one of the things that actually made it happen is the tragic death of someone around 1997, Brooke Olson. And this community came together to make sure that maybe we can't make it not happen again. We want to reduce the cost of the chances of that happening. And that's a intangible that you can't really put a dollar figure on. Which makes it really difficult then to say, okay, what's it worth to keep our recreation center open? And what's it worth to keep the spin cycles going in the exercise room? That's what makes it really difficult. And I think it's really been important to take a look at the larger pictures and say, back off from the individual items and take a look at what each of our town expenses, what they're doing for us, how we're getting our money.
Other thoughts on question 2?
Was there another part to the question, or was that pretty much it?
Are the MOUs needed? And the second part of the question was, is there a better way to outline our responsibilities? And then the third part talks about what specific goals do we have for these MOUs?
I can't really. That I would have for the other two parts.
Carol, anything? School?
I mean, from my perspective, I don't want to get into micromanaging what the rec center does. You know, I don't want them to come to the town and say, or the school and say, we need this, will you pay that? I mean, if they think they need it, then they think they need it, that's fine. I think for us, it's more just, you know, looking at the budget in general and whether we can afford to, you know, contribute to the group in general, not just for a specific cause. I think that's the most important thing. We all are very active in our own committees and very involved in our own committees. We don't need to try to like jump in to try to understand the, you know, day-to-day needs of another committee. It just doesn't work that way without knowing the details.
I often think about Brooke. And when we look at the purpose for the rec starting, one of the things that it says is to reduce juvenile delinquency on this island. And I look at our community now, look at our families, the investment of the school and the kids' place. We look at how well this community invests in families and the rec center and even up to the commons. And we've done a good job. And we joked about it. We're like, wow. Oh yeah, we're supposed to be reducing juvenile delinquency. And I just look at what changes have happened generationally on this island with how much support there's been and really how it's paid off. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And it does change how we're delivering services because we're not there to bring all the youth in to keep them from getting out of trouble in the same way that happened 25 years ago. And I want to recognize that for the growth of this community and the investment that has been made very successfully for the families that are here and for the youth that are here. So thank you.
One thing that became clear to me in trying to read through all these documents, so easy to get tangled up in the weeds, but some of the conversations that we've all had about, for example, the grass at the ball field, I think it helps to clarify the school isn't leasing the use of the land under the school building. The school is part of the town. Because at one point I said, well, is there a lease for the school leasing the land? No, the school is part of the town. The land is the town's land. The land is the school. The school owns the building, but there's no lease of the ball field to the school from the town. There's no lease of the land under the school building from the town. There is a lease of the land under the rec center from the town. And I think that lease was well drawn and it's worked well. I hope it can continue to work well. I think the fact that the town owns the ball field needs to be kept in front of all of these conversations about the difficulties, for example, in getting the ball field mowed. And I haven't always been taking that position, but this, preparing for this meeting has made it more clear to me, that's a town piece of land. Now, the school uses it. Should the school be leasing use of it from the town? No, the school's part of the town. The rec center uses it. I'm not suggesting dollars, but should there be an agreement between the town and the rec center for the use of the ball field? Whether it's a lease or in part of the MOU or whatever, I think that use, that relationship should be documented in some fashion. And to Matt's point earlier, things change over time. What changed in this case was we had an easy relationship with someone who mowed the lawn at a low price. That's no longer the case. Price has gone up. The supply of contractors doing that kind of work has gone down. So what do we do about that? And whose responsibility is it? I think it's an open question. Matt.
In order to make it all work in a cohesive way philosophically, we would be open to managing the care and maintenance of the ball fields. It is primarily a recreation type facility for, I guess, asset. And the town is looking at the recreation center to provide recreation services. We do use that ball field. It doesn't need to be kept up. If the lease was amended to include ball field and also included maintenance requirements so that the school can focus on school stuff. So their school day runs 8 to 3 or whatever those timers are, and whatever happens to kids after they leave, that becomes the rec center to provide that support in terms of services and care. I think that's something we're very open to negotiating because we need that asset to perform. Otherwise, we can't do a job. And there's struggling in terms of allocating resources to manage it. But it's just as easy for us to manage it for you guys as it is, leave it there for to hang out on the town budget and being during non resources.
Yeah.
Well, just like the small piece, I think this is like where a lot of the confusion happens, in my understanding, is like, I think why we're all sitting around here is often we seem to be battling for funds, right? And like the schools ask for money, the towns ask for money, but the reality is the umbrella is our taxpayers are all paying towards, rec center, kids place, all of that. And so I think like it all comes out of the same pocket. I agree, like we've always had this argument of the field per se and then MOU, but like during the fall and the spring, the school is using it, right? And it's our kids on the field. So it's, it's just like, it becomes almost like this tit for tat then I feel like who's then responsible when school's in session for the field. So I think, and then like I look at this, like the leasing and using the facility, can't lease to others, but we, we were paying a service to use the gym for gym class. And then, this year you said we don't have to, but it's just this like back and forth of who owes what or what. And I think that's.
We need to be really clear who owns what and just fix it.
Yeah, so I think that's like why we're sitting here. It's just the money does keep going up, especially if the school was continuing to pay. Right?
I just want to make a comment about MOUs. As someone who has read through hundreds and hundreds of conservation easement documents and conserved lands, this is the lease for the rec center is not that different. And what I do know about these documents is the simpler the better. Leaving specific numbers out, that is much better. I think one thing that's missing for me in this MOU is a statement of expectation from the rec center. It can be one sentence, like, and it's, and it is in the lease to a certain degree of serve these people. But I think through the years, there's been this feeling of the rec isn't doing enough for the community, so there's not as much support for funding from town funds. what is that, like, why, I think that's where the rec is coming from in terms of confusion around, okay, what would you like to see? Like, give us an idea and we'll meet that. I think not getting in the weeds is extremely important, but some sort of general expectation that's included in the MOU. So as people sit around a table through the years, there's this understanding of the town fully supports the rec center, but we do expect you to provide programming year round to serve the year-round community first, or I'm using that as an example. Some statement, and maybe I missed it in one of these documents, but some statement of expectation, I think, would be helpful. And I think we're all a team, right? Just as Courtney said, the money comes from, the money that the select board is determining how to disperse comes from taxpayers. And so it's kind of like, who's gonna pay for the field? One way or another, it's coming from one of our entities. So let's figure out the most efficient way to do that. So it costs everyone the lowest amount. So, I know the rec center is thinking about getting a mower, because we have a lot of lawn to mow for the rec center and kids' place. And our mowing costs are quite high. They've increased exponentially almost in recent years, as have other costs. And so, is there an opportunity to work together on that? Like, if we had a mower, how can we figure this out so that it's the most affordable for everyone involved? Because I think, like Matt said, the rec center is fully willing to step up to the plate and take that on and do the mowing spring, summer, fall, with the understanding between us that the school gets to use it during school hours. That's just the way it is. But, I would like to see the rec center doing more after school programming out on the field in those warmer months after school, and the school does that with their after school program. And I anticipate that Jack will do that as well once things warm up a little bit. So, and not to mention, how many days do you drive by that field and there's just random members of the community out there using it? It's really a service for everyone. So I think the question is just what makes the most sense in terms of who's going to do it and who's going to pay for it. But I think, certainly the rec is going to take that on, and we all agree that that's the best use.
I really appreciate the spirit of, let's just talk about the issues and understand each other better as the, ground rules for this meeting. And I have a couple of things I wanted to say, which is, first of all, I like the idea that we share it. If the field is there, regardless of who owns it, there is this openness to, just like the parade arrives at the school grounds and there could be, a tug of war games in that field, kind of whoever owns it, that we will all always want to work together toward the benefit of the community. But that there would be a fairness about the support for it. And then I have a rather dumb question, which is, if our budget, like you were saying, with the, you have this launching ahead of a budget, whereas we come in February, our budget has already started because it's a January, December 31st, and then it's January 1st it starts. And then you guys in the school budget start in July, is it right?
The school and the town are on the same schedule.
Yeah, so maybe we should be on the schedule. Let's turn that. Yeah. We'll talk about that. Doesn't that seem like that would take out some of the tension in the budget meeting? Because we're like, we've written our budget and we need the money, and then you guys are like, hey, we'll say whether we're going to give it.
I will say the town and the school are not going to jump on changing their budget to January to December. So that's a discussion for the next.
That launching area instead of already, which makes it very hard.
I think that's for you as a board to decide.
One other slight amplification, just in the interest of total openness. I would state what Courtney said a little bit different. All the money that the school spends is taxpayer money. All the money that the select board spends is taxpayer money. All the money that the rec center spends is not taxpayer. Some of it is taxpayer money, but to some degree, I hadn't thought of this before, but you might be able to look at it as that increases the scrutiny that the select board is under when they're in conversations about how much money to spend on the rec. Because there are taxpayers who think we should spend more, there are taxpayers who think we should spend less, but it's not, there's an alternative. You have an alternative. The school doesn't have the alternative of going out and doing fundraising events. I don't think you can even legally do that, can you?
Well, the PTA needs to open.
We fundraise for like field trips.
TA wasn't connected directly to this.
Roughly, the town is what, a third or a quarter of the rec budget?
That's right. Yeah. It's-
Yeah, but it's not 100%. That's what clear.
As a taxpayer, I think no matter what we end up doing with the MOU, we need to beef up the financial reporting that comes out of us to demonstrate to the taxpayer how the money's being used. That's number one, but number two, that's being accounted for properly, because as a taxpayer, you're right, you've got this commingling thing going on, and it's a little hybridized, and there isn't direct control in the same way there is with taxpayer dollars. And the original MOU language doesn't set that standard, and that's something that we would like to improve on.
And this, the MOU here lists a whole bunch of documents that are required to be submitted to the town for the returns each year. That, I mean, that's like a pretty substantial list that I don't think has been done.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, just submitting
Yes.
this information, the very illuminating.
If we decide to continue with that, I would ask that we look at what's the overlap between these documentation requirements and what the town is now asking of all nonprofits. There's a difference between over 20,000 and under 20,000, but what financial reporting are we looking for?
Yeah.
I'd love to streamline that as much as possible, make it easier for you guys to generate, and frankly, make it easier for us to read.
If you just give you guys an annual report every year that the level of details, as well as quarterly financial statements that can form the gap, is that sufficient? Because we can get like all the data you guys need is in that package. And if there's specific drilling down we can do on an ad hoc basis, happy to provide it. But I think you're absolutely right. This is kind of a mishmash between like what people thought they needed versus what's actually being worked on, and we're trying to rationalize these two things to make our lives a lot easier.
I think what was asked this year from the board to present to the board was as a result of the fact that these MOUs existed and the understanding was they were going to be updated on an annual basis. And it, you know, part one says the Board of Selectmen agreed to bring a warrant article to the annual town meeting recommending a contribution to the CRC as long as the conditions of these agreements are met. And so I think that's really one of the big reasons why we're here is because the board the last couple of years has been sitting and the rec center has been coming to them and increasing their ask without seeing a lot of these documents. And so that was the premises behind why the board asked for those specifics this year, because they were very in the dark of not knowing what was going on. And so that's really kind of why the conversation is here today is the information that the rec center has, the information that the town is looking for. How do you bring that information together to have a document? So then, you know, coming to the town's budget, what is expected of you and what you'd need to bring. The town knows what they're going to receive. And so there's that collaboration of knowing the expectation and not having these drawn on discussions. So that's kind of, I think, you know, where those specifics resulted from, that you did bring a lot of information this year. So.
I'd just like to say one thing about the ball field, if I may. I agree with Matt's statement. I think you said that it might be simpler if there was a way to have the recreation center be responsible for the baseball field. Now, having said that, I do think it's town-owned land, and I think there could be a collaboration financially somehow from the town, school, and rec center to purchase the appropriate machine to accomplish that task. Have a place to keep it, have someone hopefully contracted. I've already been working on some, not sure he will agree, to maintain the machine, and then one or two individuals authorized to use the machine. That's going to be the most efficient way for it to get done the way people want it to get done and when they want it to get done. And it'll be the most efficient taxpayers, in my opinion. But when that field was donated by a family on here, the expectation was very clear from the family. They wanted that field taken care of for their donation. And it was a good donation. We used to play up there on the old big turf, but the field had one sprained ankle.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. To be clear, what I was expecting when we originally talked about 2 years worth of budget versus actual, and then the current year's year to date, and then the proposed budget. I was asking that because as a few documents came forth a couple years ago, I saw what I think was a big gap between the budget that was proposed a year before versus the actuals that happened in the finance. And I used to be on the rec board. I know that the plug in your budget is fundraising. And if you fundraise a lot more than you thought you were going to, that's good news. But now I'm wearing the hat of someone who's supposed to be representing the taxpayers. And if the taxpayer looks at that and says, well, they said they were going to bring in 100,000 in revenue and they brought in 150 and now they're asking for 10 more. How does that make sense?
Can I answer that?
I didn't want to answer the question. I was just trying to make the point why I think clear, simple financial reporting as part of the budget process is important. So my vision was 5 columns in a nice spreadsheet on 2 pages. And what we got was a couple hundred pages. And my desire to look across each year, each budget item. Oh, that line item went from here to here to here. That makes sense. I spent hours on that presentation. It was a wonderful presentation. It had a ton of information in it, but it didn't allow me to do what I was trying to do, which was a simple review, item by item, look for exceptions. If you look at the town budget, which is now inclusive of the school budget, it's pretty easy to see what 2 years ago looked like, what last year looked like, what this year to date looks like, and what we're proposing.
So that's our goal. That's where I want to be, because from a management information perspective, it drives me bonkers. The only tools that I have right now are the same, what I gave, what we provide.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is super duper challenging, because again, that's good management, right, is having that research. Is that as we bring our historical statements up to gap, accounts are coming on and dropping off. And how we account for things through time is starting to evolve. And even in this financial period, which is 24, as we're continuing that transition, a lot of these different things are in flight. So what we're actually end up with financial statements for 23 and 24 at the end of this year may in fact be materially different than what we've actually provided. So once we actually are able to bed down, what are the accounts? How are we doing amortization? How are we expensing things? And what our accounting policies are, then we'll be able to provide that consistency. But if I was to give that to you and say, okay, here's, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, the accounting policies in those periods are so materially different that you would have data to look at. It just wouldn't be meaningful. Does that generally make sense?
I absolutely understand it, and I'd like to not go down into those weeds as much as we are. I would love it if more people talk besides Bob and Matt. And Matt have been talking a lot. Speak up, number 3. I think the next question to talk about is what specific goals. So I think we need to define what MOUs we want, if any. And I think it's clear that a memorandum of understanding between the rec and the town is critical. Yes.
When you say the rec in the town, is the school included in that town?
That's what I was trying to.
Or do we feel like we need to have one between the rec and the school, including ball field, gym rental, after school, all the things that we're looking for them to assist us or provide? So, the school is part of the town. I mean, you both have said, town departments in the school. The school is a town department. So, if you want to have a specific memorandum for the school and the rec, that's one thing, but it is part of the town. So you could just have different articles that related to the school.
That's
in the
what
rec.
I was trying to word.
Yeah.
Get into words. Speak up.
So for somebody who has to keep track of all these different things and the constant transition of people coming and going. My recommendation would be that, it's as simple as an MOU between the town and the rec. And one of the bullet points specifies the services that would be provided specific to the school. Just because, we had I went and I looked and I found the MOU between the rec and the school and the town. I had no idea, and I was working as the town clerk at the town at the time that the kids' place won. So that stuff gets so lost in the weeds that I think the less documents and the more defined that document is, I think the easier would be to keep track for all of the departments. That would be my recommendation. And maybe it's, as simple as the MOU between the town and the rec, and includes a section for kids' place, a section for the school, and just kind of provides those bullets. So it's just one document, not 4 different documents. I mean, that would be my recommendation, but I don't know how other people feel about it.
But keep the lease the same, or do you want to have one master document that goes?
The lease?
Yeah, are you proposing that you have one master document inclusive of the same language that's in the lease, or are you saying we have one lease and then?
So my suggestion would be is if the discussion between the 2 boards is to, with the lease, then you would do similar to what you suggested. You take the existing lease that the town has, the town allowing the rec center to use that land, and just expand that lease to provide the use of that ball field. I mean, that would be my perspective of it. So it's just 2 documents. The more you have, the harder it is to keep track of it, from personal experience having to look for these things.
I would suggest that the lease is something that we touch every 10 years, if that. Whereas the MOU is something that we look at every year as part of the budget.
Yep,
review
I
process.
agree.
So
It's
there's
part
not
of the
like a-
budget process. All departments kind of look through it to make sure they're still in check with it.
Expound on that just a little bit, because like operationally, that creates a little more complexity on our side. So when you say, look at the MOU, does that mean there's like a part of the budgeting process involves a certification that the MOU is fit for purpose? Or are you saying that we could potentially reopen the MOU for negotiation? You just put a little more clarity on what your intent is.
My intent was that we look at the MOU and see if the conditions are being met as part of the budget review process.
Okay.
Not that we open it up every year. I would open it up for negotiation whenever one party or the other thought it was necessary, whenever situations had changed. And a good example, well, I'm going to use the grass as a good example. It's not a good example. But I would specifically ask that we not propose to open up the MOU during the budget season. I think that's the worst time in the world to do it.
Can I make a quick,
Yeah, go ahead.
so quick suggestion for the rec center and kids' place is if your budget season is starting now versus the towns that starts at a different time of the year, you're an opportunity to look at your MOU with the rec center prior to coming to the town with the budget number. So you could potentially approach the town well in advance of the town kind of having it on their radar, if your budgets are staggered significantly different from the towns, if that makes sense.
Go ahead.
Just super quick on that MOU. So I would see the agreement for the town. And not having the schools just under the town, but more of the facility use. And then I would see the funding that you're speaking to is in regards to programming for all year-round residents. Because I've mentioned this at a school committee, we've brought up the after-school programming, but I see after-school programming as, not connected to the school, really. That's a program you're providing to meet your mission statement for young kids, and parents would be willing to pay for that. Like, it keeps working families, all of that. So I do want to make sure that the programming piece is that's something that the town believes in regards to the funding is necessary as part of the MOU, but I would see the facility use as the most important in regards to the ball field. The town uses it for town meeting. So I think that is separated.
And the
Yeah, the
gymnasium.
gym, yeah, the gym and all of that. So I just see them as two different entities.
To the extent that we can get out of having to negotiate with the school board and the town at the same time during the same budget season, and we can just have one master MOU that covers areas of domain responsibility that we're all kind of in alignment with, especially with, hey, after school is really a rec program. That would allow us to just negotiate directly with the board and not have this kind of like tri-party thing that's constantly in play. I'm sure it's distracting for you as well.
What it's going to mean then is more negotiation between the school and select board,
If
more communication.
communication, yes. I think, if it's clear on who's on the hook for what in the MOU, and that's very, very precise, or it doesn't have to be precise, but conceptually precise. I guess it's very clear where the domains of responsibility are. Maybe the school doesn't really need to have that because it says in the MOU that we just have to give access whenever they want it. So it's less of a P&L cash management going back and forth and more of a kind of, are we meeting the expectations of the town? Does that make sense?
Would it be permissible to ask one of my classic logistical questions?
Yeah.
This is for both the school and rec center. How do you plan on getting the ball field mowed for this year? Because when I went to your budget meeting, you had $7,000 or $8,000 in that budget. I guess my question is, did that stay in, or are you going to ask the town to assist like we did last year? That's my question.
It is currently in our budget. We have two scenarios that we're working on right now. One would be contracting with a new company that is out here doing lawn care. The other, which is substantially much more money than our previous contractor. The other one is we do have a subcontractor that last year completed around the school as well as the playground and also does some interior work for us, and to purchase a mower and have that person contract that person to do the ball field.
But if the town says that they want to buy a mower, then, you know.
That's right, that would be, which as the taxpayers, school or town.
Town is buying, school is buying, that's totally,
The same.
doesn't matter.
I know.
I know.
Yeah.
If the rec is buying a lawnmower, then it's a negotiation, how much of the lawnmower is being used for the town property, it's under release, all that thing.
I don't think we can have to leave that to the lawnmower. That's the end of the solution. End up being either in the lease, we're not going to do it. We absorb that expense in our budget. You contribute to the degree that you want to contribute to. I don't think getting the details of like, we use it 30% for the ball field, so please pay for 30% of the mower. That's a lot.
And I apologize, my question was simply, do you have a plan for this coming?
Right. It is bringing out the point. Back to the questions. What specific goals do we have for the MOUs? A question I have is, long-term, does the rec plan to keep Kids Place under its wing? It's been a unspoken question for a long time. Is the rec's plan, should there be two MOUs or should there be one?
Here's why.
Matt, can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
I'd really like for you and me to not talk. But let everybody else answer some questions, please.
So what we're looking at for a corporate formation is to have a subsidiary be the Kids Place. So it would be its own 501c3 within the umbrella organization. And that would allow us to have much better separation of finances. What I had wanted to say a little earlier, to your point about, hey, you guys, you're showing a big surplus. Why should the town and the taxpayers give you the same amount? The answer to that was Friends of Kids Place got together and said, wow, this childcare center / early childhood education program is really struggling to keep its doors open, not just COVID, but with one teacher and burnout and, a sick day means it's closed down, and what do working families do? They said there's got to be more redundancy and the educators, there's got to be.
We know that you answered that question. So I used it as an example. I wasn't saying I don't understand. I was using it simply as an example.
If I could have my 3 minutes,
Please.
I don't know. So to answer, to get back to the corporate structure, we are going to have more of a separation than you see now. We tried 2 divisions and that still isn't quite enough of a separation. So at this point in time, we're still working it out. We're looking at it being a subsidiary, so be a bit more separate entity than the rec center, but still we share some resources.
David.
So does that mean that I think I heard you say we then have two contracts, one for the kids' place, one for the rec center, or would they be combined into one?
When you say contract, you mean MOU?
MOU.
So it'll be two MOUs. And what's important to note is that the plan to have a separate subsidiary is in flight. And the reason why we got there was because we couldn't meet the needs of donors from a financial reporting standpoint in terms of showing them the transparency that we want, that they require, that we wanted to give them by having two divisions. So on what is currently anticipated to be January 1st, 2025, there will be a wholly owned 501c3 of the recreation center. That's going to be the Kids Place School. And that particular school will have its own budget. It'll come with its own ask. It will have its own set of donors that are very, very interested in supporting that specific entity. The service to the community is not going to change. The service to the parents isn't going to change. Nothing's going to change from a kind of what's being provided standpoint. It's just literally a legal mechanism that allows us to deliver financial reporting that gives everybody in the town, the rec, and the donors real crisp, clear transparency in terms of how much does it cost to provide early childhood development services to the island. And as part of that information being delivered, we hope that it can help foster a conversation around to what degree does the town want to support that cost base, because then we'll have really, really good transparency around what's being delivered and how much.
And let's be real, the kids' place was struggling. We were struggling with staff, we were struggling with maintaining consistent quality, and it was very difficult. And honestly, it was stressful upon the organization of the rec center as well as the kids' place, but that ripple effect on the families and employers was enormous. So until these funders stepped in and said, whoa, we're gonna specifically just support the kids' place, that's allowed Caitlin to be hired to manage it. It's allowed fabulous staffing, and you've been able to accommodate the needs of the staff. So we have awesome staff right now. They're very happy with their job, and that carries through to the kids. So being able to keep those separate, because it looks like we're getting a lot of money at the rec center, when honestly it's been earmarked for the kids' place. So keeping that separate, we think strengthens the position of the kids' place with our donors who are stepping up and making long-range commitments to the kids' place. But it also helps us be more realistic about what we have for donors at the rec center. So I know, Carol, when you spoke about how it looks like we're doing really well with our donations, it really is, in a sense, donations that have gone to the kids' place as intended by those donors. And that has made a tremendous difference. Yeah, and I guess I don't mean exactly what I said. My concern is that it's reliant on such a large percentage of donations. Well, that kind of a shaky ground. And I understand it sounds like we should have a plan. Yeah. But the town is also partnering along its place. And I do prioritize kids' place over some of the other things like upside not, but like pickleball. I mean, I see it as a different service that, you know, provides. But I think, you know, I at one meeting, it was said to the school of the select board that, well, don't designate this money for kids' place, because we have an easier time raising money for that. So we want you to give it to the rec center, you know, cost center. And, you know, that didn't sit well with me. Because I think what we have to do is justify why we're giving this nonprofit this the most amount of money of any of the nonprofits. It's much more than, you know, many of the other ones. I feel that there is a higher level of scrutiny. We've had trouble getting a sense of your finances, because apparently you've had trouble getting a sense of your own finances. I find it highly unusual that you are using the current allocation within the budget year to operate. And I hope that you will consider some other arrangement, because that seems very ill-advised. we cannot guarantee anything. Ultimately, town meeting makes it. And generally, they're pretty generous, but there's no guarantee that some year they won't vote it down. So I can't imagine operating an organization where you're not sure what you're getting in real time in that budget year. So that's a board issue, but it seems highly.
Well, I hope you've seen we've made great progress.
But I never knew until this year that was the way you operate. I understand now the anxiety coming to the budget meetings, but at the same time, things like that. So that's just a separate aside, but I think, you know, we do hear from the community kind of grumblings about lack of services and lack of, you know, and there were a lot of problems during COVID with this place and everything else, and everybody had challenges, so I think we're in a new day. But, and it seems like Kids Place has been stable, and it's 5 days a week, and there's been a lot of improvements. That's awesome. So I think that's been a huge success in terms of how you, and I agree, you showed it, the number did not overturn. If people had to really pay what it costs, they wouldn't be able.
3 times the cost.
Right, so I think those are all, you know, kudos to you guys for that. I think making them permanent, separate 501(c)(3)s is a good idea. And I hope to think about it down rec center and the Kids Place. But it's very muddy to me, kind of the finances and the operations on the rec center side.
You want to think about it.
And you understand that then we have to answer to that. We do.
So,
You know-
if I could, is it, to get back to the question on the table, sounds like the rec board, Kids Place are in favor of 2 MOUs. And I'm back to, what specific goals do we have for MOUs? Is it the sense of the board that a separate, MOU for the rec and one for the Kids Place? You can't vote, but is that sounding logical to everybody, or do we need to talk more in an open meeting? Mark?
I think your reasoning as a board for separating the Kids Place and defining it more as its own 501(c)(3) is financial reporting and transparency, correct?
Yes.
I think the reason for 2 MOUs would be probably makes sense to match that. I would think. I think originally the MOU with the rec center, part of the concern was possibly the lack of attention to long-range capital needs. And I think that's starting to get addressed now, which is going to be a good thing moving forward, because you're going to have some big expenses coming up. And that was a concern. So if that's getting addressed, both with the endowment and somewhat of a plan and with a set of goals attached to the plan, that'll be a good thing for the community to understand too. And it's what.
Carol, David, any initial thoughts? We're not voting, but does that sound logical?
2 MOUs make sense, whether they're in the same document or not, it doesn't really matter. I think you're still gonna end up with 2 separate documents. And that's fine with me. They can be bundled together easily.
Carol, any thoughts?
Well, since there are going to be 2 separate 501(c)(3), that's how we operate. I don't quite understand the structure. Financially, it's
Correct. I mean, legally speaking, if we end up taking the Kids Place assets and dropping them into a wholly owned subsidiary, which is a separate entity, the rec center can't encumber a separate legal entity with an MOU to which that legal entity is not a party. So if you want to, so I think the way we'll structure it is that we'll have 2 MOUs. Both will, the counterparty for the town would be CRC. However, on the Kids Place MOU, there'll be the assignment language. So at the time at which there's a new legal entity, that MOU will get assigned down.
Great. So it leads me back to a point that was made earlier that I wanted to amplify on a little bit. I'm I don't think we necessarily need a separate MOU between the school and the rec center. But I do think there are sort of annual issues that are going to come up between the town and the rec center, both of whom are working with our kids that may not fit into the MOU. And the example I'll give is the after-school program. I've heard different things from different school board members as to whether it should be 2 days and 2 days, or 4 days here, or 4 days there. And I don't know that the select board brings any value to that conversation. So as we move forward in this, I would just ask that we think about, are there specific, I don't want to call them detail level issues because they're very important issues, but they're more rapidly changing issues that don't fit into the construct of an MOU that the school committee and the rec board might, or Kids Place might want to work on their own. Yes.
So I just want to clarify, so I understand. So the MOU is an outline that assists with the budget process, correct? And then therefore you may not get your funding, correct? Correct?
Their
So
expectation.
they go hand in hand, in other words.
Yes.
Their statement of expectations between two organizations who happen to move a lot of money from one to the other.
Okay, so to go to your comment about the after school,
Yeah.
from my understanding, part of that $8,000 I was told that was partly used to cover the after school program. So I know that we're not supposed to be getting into the nitty gritty, but you know, for budget purposes, that would be a budgetary line item that ultimately would come from the town. So if there would be some sort of cost that the school would end up having to pay for just the after school program, again, that's taxpayer money, that's part of the town budget. So, you know, that would go into using the gym for gym class. It's the same type of thing. And I think that, I mean, I'll speak for myself as a school committee member. It's very confusing as to A, what services you're going to provide for the school, and are they going to be consistent year after year? Is that something we need to look at? And B, you know, does funding need to come from the school part of the budget, or does it just come from the budget that you ask, or the amount that you ask from the town? Because at the end of the day, it is the same pot.
Back to the history, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand the history of the $8,000, but I think that, you know, that's really what, and again, I know we're not talking about financial and numbers and whatnot, but I think that's something to think about when writing these MOUs, because as a school committee member, our job is to try to, you know, do the best that we can to the taxpayers while also providing the services that the children of the island deserve and need in order to be, you know, educated and successful and whatnot. So, you know, I would strongly think about, you know, adding that into the MOU.
So I just want to add a little bit. I think that, I mean, after school activities, after school care for the elementary school kids especially is incredibly important to the working families out here. I think that it's a service that the school provides for the families, and it's a service that the rec center provides for the families. I don't look at it as a service that the rec center provides for the school. So I think that it would be wise for the school and the rec to meet every summer, like pick a day, first, you know, second week of July, whatever, and come up with a plan and say, this is what we can do, this is what we can do, and put out a notice to the parents. Because it's not, you know, it's not something that's within our school day. It's not something that we're required to provide to families as a school perspective, but it's something that we feel is important. You know, Yarmouth does some after school stuff at Yarmouth Elementary School, but they also have Yarmouth Community Services that, you know, provides different camps or whatever. And the difference is that Yarmouth Community Service charges the parents for that, and that's very clear on their website and all that, versus Yarmouth Elementary School just says, you know, it's free gym after school on Tuesdays, or, you know, whatever. So I just think it's important for the communication to happen between the school and the rec early in the summer, so that the parents can know that what they can expect come fall. But I don't know that I'm not sure about is that it needs to be in the MOU because it's really a service that's provided separately and not, it's for the benefit of the families, not for the benefit of each other.
So hearing what you guys are saying, my recommendation would be that the monetary aspect and the relationship between the rec center and the kids' place gets completely eliminated. And any money that the rec center is asking for goes through the town select board.
Yeah.
And kind of go into what you were saying earlier, where it's not one and the other, and then the town is saying, well, wait, you're kind of going to a variety of different places. So the communication between the two entities, I think, is wonderful and great. But I think the funds should be siphoned through one, through one organization, and that very well might really clear up this.
Right.
The stress for this board to know what they're gonna budget, the stress for this board to know how much they're gonna ask from them, but then if they don't give it, how much they might ask from them, and just kind of clear that up.
So are you saying that the cost of providing after-school care should be borne by the rec center for the 2 days a week and the school for the 2 days a week? And that's recognized in our budget as a separate?
So and maybe that's a misunderstanding. I guess what I'm saying is that when the rec center is coming to the taxpayers for funds, that is one location going to the select board, not taxpayers. Can the school provide a couple thousand? Can the rec provide a couple thousand? You figure out what you need to cover all your expenses and siphon it to the, to one location to eliminate the confusion.
Like what you did with last year with the bookkeeper.
It was a similar thing with the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper's salary was split between the school, between the town. It was confusing, but it was really all the same taxpayer. So the board just said, it's a town expense. I think that would be.
And somebody mentioned, like on the MOU, I think Caitlin, you did, of like expected services. I think that's where it's like the programs that are for adults, pickleball, the cribbage during the, all of those things, and programming for young children, which usually happens after school, and teenagers and all of that. And it's up to the rec within their budget to decide what they're going to charge for that service. And maybe it's not a member, non-member, but it's a resident, non-resident, since taxpayers are contributing towards that overall budget. But I think that's part, like the service isn't being provided to school or whatnot, but you're providing these services, these programs to the community, and you're thinking about how we're budgeting that within. And like, if we need to charge because to make ends meet for that, like that's your choice. But I do think that's the essential service of why the town is funded. Right?
Yeah, and I would support that, because I think over time, the rec center is involved in having membership. It didn't initially when many of these documents here. And the assumption was that the town was providing these funds to provide services to the residents. Well, actually visitors, but at least the residents. And so I think that's worth the discussion not tonight, about the difference between the resident payments versus memberships. And I think had you come to me tonight and said, how would you operate it? I would say, we'll give you a chunk of change and residents don't pay anything.
We've looked at that as a
Right, and
possibility.
so that's a potential model that you should consider that would fly, I would assume, with the taxpayers or some of the taxpayers. I mean, I think there has to be some differentiation between, once you get into a membership fee, that starts to feel like there's some exclusivity. Then we have to worry about, well, what about the people that can afford it? How do they access those services? You say, well, we have a special fund. But I think that's where it starts to get dicey, because there may be people that can't access or don't feel comfortable accessing. Not a conversation for tonight.
So Matt,
In the interest of meeting your goal on some degree, If we took these ideas and we drafted some language to look at and discuss conceptually, not necessarily how we pay for it, what the reasons are, but just give us a document we can talk about. If we drafted up something for y'all to look at, would you be open to discussing that?
That's pretty much the question I was gonna ask along with a due date. Date that we could go back and add this time to have this discussion and finalize it.
So we've got, in terms of a due date, personally, I would love to have such drafts prepared, one for rec, one for Kids Place, and to have you guys take what exists. I think we could probably find them in a Word document fashion, start with them, play with them, add what you think. Ask for input from the board whenever you want. I would propose that we discuss it after we get past budget season. And perhaps even, yeah.
And budget season is roughly what dates?
It ends with town meeting, basically.
Okay.
Something like that.
The town warrant is going to be finalized on May 1st. And then we have the town meeting. So between now and the second week of June, the select board and the school board are
It's budget season.
12 feet deep in a budget season.
So things slow down after town meeting. We actually have at times gone to one meeting per month. So yes, it's summer, everybody has family coming and all that. It's also not good time. David and then Liza.
Okay, one other question, are the numbers that we currently have in our draft budget good? Are we going ahead with those?
I don't think we should be talking about that tonight.
I agree. So to kind of cover the basis, as it stands, next Wednesday, the select board has their 4th draft budget workshop. What the rec center had proposed to the select board are the numbers that are currently in there. The 4th draft is creeping up to needing to be close to the final numbers. So that's when that discussion should take place and those numbers should be finalized.
But what's in there right now is the numbers that were proposed. Is that correct? I believe it is.
For the correct. So the numbers that they exist right now is there was the 59.5 that was asked for the rec center. There was the 30 that was asked for the kids place. And then there was the 0 that the rec center brought and suggested to the school board. So those are the numbers as they exist going into the 4th draft.
And Liza.
So the interest of the school is a very specific age group. It's the kids and the families. The same is true of the kids' place. It's a feeder system for all of us, but what they need to provide is really clear to everyone for childcare. The rec center, Bob, you started the meeting saying that you wanted a definition of the rec center taking care of the island residents first, but your definition of that, everyone here will have a different definition of our rec center taking care of our island residents. It's to the pickleball players, they think that's the most important. To after school care for our families, they think that's going to be the most important. We're really trying to be everything to all people. And I'm proud to say we did a survey for the summer camps this winter. Everything that was requested by families in that survey is being delivered this summer, except for dance class. Sorry, Kate. But
Unless you want to.
we're really making an effort to expand our services. We have between 9 and 13 events every week in the rec center for all ages. I want to say this summer, we're looking at such expanded summer camps. And I think the quality we have with Jack as our camp director is going to be awesome. Our swimming is expanded exponentially with access for swimming classes. So while some people are saying, how do you serve the island residents? I hope we're doing a good job, especially this year, but it's very hard to have a feel for how would you say we're serving the island residents and how would you measure that?
What I was alluding to was the language in the lease, which refers to citizens.
I know.
Okay. And citizens, by the legal definition, what we got back was, help me, what did Natalie say? There's a specific definition of citizens. It's not just voters. So
Year-round and summer residents combined.
year-round and summer residents combined is what citizens refers to legally in the context of this lease and the documents that preceded this lease. So that's what I was referring to with that comment. Personally, as one board member, my observation, I'm somebody who's no longer on the rec board. I'm not nearly as involved as I used to be. But when I look at the calendar that came out today, I saw what in my perception is less stuff aimed at young people, more stuff aimed at old people. My personal, not the board, my personal want. I'm going to tailor it by saying, I know times have changed.
Yeah.
I know that the staffing challenges we had, staffing teen center 5 nights a week, don't exist anymore to some degree because kids have moved on to other pursuits, whether it's their phone, whatever. However, that's my perception. When I look at that calendar, the two things that jumped out are mahjong and pickleball. And that's for people that are not in what I would call a strategically challenged element of our community. We don't need more old people. We got plenty of old people. All of us in here, some of you are not. What we don't have is kids, and what we don't have is what we don't have enough of is young families. So my push will all personally, not as a board, as one board member, is more stuff that helps young families be here, stay here, move here. Whether it's kids' place, whether it's after school programs. I may come back and lift weights there someday, but probably not gonna see me playing pickleball. I got 2 mechanical knees. That doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's about my belief is based solely on the fact that I think for this community to survive as a year-round community, we need to continue to buttress our programs and our attractiveness for young families. That's where I was speaking.
Can I just ask a question just so that way I understand what the next steps are, so then I can make sure that I know what we're doing. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the consensus is that the rec is going to take a look at the current MOUs, Kids Place and the rec center, draft it up with understanding that they're gonna bring that to the town. And then the town is gonna take a look at that and proceed the discussion. Is that the understanding?
Town in this case includes both the school.
And the school and the town can collaborate better to get an understanding of how that works. Can we put a deadline so then that way I have an expectation of knowing when I can start hassling people when it's not received? June 1st, does that? Okay.
To have a draft available to look at before town meeting would be great. Not that we'll
So-
necessarily meet.
So you're looking at the MOUs. You mentioned the lease. Does that need to be adapted to include the ball field?
Yes, I would also suggest that while you're looking at changes and amendments and suggestions relative to the 2 MOUs, come up with language that could be appended to the current lease that refers to the ball field. Is that?
But I would suggest if we are the lease or whatever.
Yes,
That's kind of an hour.
correct. I agree with that. So looking at the history of how the changes to the lease were done, it was initiated by the town. My one recommendation would be, in the interest of time, with the school being concerned and maybe the rec center being concerned, that maybe that's something that should be discussed prior to June 1st.
We can take a stab at these language from the intersectionality between all 3 documents, being able to like just give you guys all of our thoughts on how they intersect all at once, so you guys can have a cohesive view would really be a lot more efficient for us.
We can have it, and you can take or leave the change.
Yeah, exactly.
We can have it printed and super.
I'm not proposing we make changes to the
Well, Sharon Reddick just suggested that the ball field be a town park, and I personally love that idea.
I think
It's town land, you said that.
the topic at hand has to do with the use
Maintenance.
and maintenance of the ball fields.
It's but
The use and maintenance of the ball field.
used by the entire town.
Okay. Who maintains that?
Who maintains it?
It's a town, it's town land.
I'm gonna suggest that we discuss that as a select board and get back to you about how to come up with a lease proposal. A proposed lease relative to the ball field, whether it's an amendment, whether it's a separate lease, whatever. We'll get back to you. Mark.
Without offending anyone, I was hoping newly elected select board members, but it's not me.
Nice try.
You first pretty much got that covered for you, Mark. You're gonna have to read it, but you're not gonna do anything.
I'm gonna make you work till the last very minute.
Yeah, right. So did you get your to-do list?
Yep, June 1, and then,
Any,
Do let's go speak that, so, I see that language again, of what you want.
Thank
you.
I will bombard everyone else with more emails.
Good, thank
I
you.
think everybody who's here, or at least the head of each board, that's probably the easiest way to do. Send it to the head of each board. And let
Was working before.
Any closing comments from the board? If we could keep it to one conversation, please. Thank you. Closing comments from the board. Mark, David.
I just want to thank everybody for coming together and working together, which is what we always need to do and want to do, and I appreciate it.
Carol, anything? Rick?
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Jenny and I have a job interview with the theater director shortly. We gotta go. 8:00.
Anything? Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everybody coming together to talk about it. And